December 1944. The Ardennes forest, Belgium. Winter had arrived early, and the air was sharp with cold, carrying the faint smell of frostbitten earth and smoke from distant artillery. Roads were narrow and barely navigable. Snow and ice coated the trees, and in the dim early morning light, columns of American troops advanced slowly through the dense woodland, pushing toward German positions reported along the ridges and villages ahead. The Battle of the Bulge was underway, a surprise offensive by the German army that had thrown the Allies into chaos. Units were moving in fragmented pockets, cut off from communications, relying on scouts and couriers. Among them was a battalion of the U.S. Army's 3rd Infantry Division, led by Colonel Robert H., a seasoned officer known for his calm under fire. His command post had been established in a small stone farmhouse at the edge of the forest, intended as a temporary hub to coordinate reinforcements along the northern flank. By the afternoon of December 19th, German scouts had observed the farmhouse. What had started as routine reconnaissance quickly escalated into a larger movement. A battalion-sized German force began to encircle the area, intent on capturing the American command post. The Americans, though outnumbered and with communications compromised, were determined to hold their position. Colonel Robert was aware of the danger. Reports from forward scouts had been delayed, and the first hint that the enemy was closing in came when a runner returned with news of German troops seen moving along the ridgeline. It was no longer a question of maneuvering. It was a matter of survival. Inside the farmhouse, the colonel reviewed maps with his officers, plotting defensive positions and contingency routes. The men were tense, aware that if the Germans breached the perimeter, the situation could quickly become catastrophic. Outside, the snow-covered landscape seemed deceptively quiet. But the crunch of boots and the distant thud of artillery told another story. By late afternoon, German soldiers had begun to establish positions around the farmhouse. They were methodical, surrounding the building from multiple angles. Their intent was clear. The colonel and his staff must either surrender or be neutralized. The Americans, in turn, could see the figures moving against the white background of snow, their dark coats and helmets clearly outlined against the icy terrain. Colonel Robert knew that retreating without orders could lead to confusion and potentially more casualties, so he remained in place. His subordinates were anxious, some pacing in the small room, others preparing defensive positions at the windows. The battalion had no armored support nearby, and artillery cover was limited. Their radios were intermittent, and reinforcements were uncertain. The colonel understood that the Germans were testing them, trying to gauge both resolve and reaction. A German officer stepped forward from the ranks, signaling that surrender was expected. Using a captured American flag as a marker, he attempted to communicate. The Americans raised their rifles cautiously, prepared for any sudden action. Colonel Robert did not respond immediately. He measured the moment, weighing the value of his command, his men, and the larger strategic picture. Minutes passed, the tension inside the farmhouse thickening. Outside, the Germans waited, their own nerves taut but disciplined. They had orders, and their commanders were aware that hesitation could be costly. Any unnecessary firefight could result in casualties on both sides. And in the Ardennes, winter itself was as much an enemy as the opposing army. Colonel Robert finally stepped to the window. He raised his hand slowly, signaling a temporary halt to any immediate action. Then, using a map and a combination of gestures and a few broken German words learned from previous campaigns, he communicated that he would not surrender outright. He was offering a negotiation, buying time, and demonstrating resolve. The Germans paused, evaluating this unexpected response. Hours passed. The colonel and his officers devised a plan. Using small flanking teams, they would attempt to secure a narrow escape route through the tree line, allowing the bulk of their men to withdraw or reposition. Scouts were sent under the cover of snow and trees, observing their movements and reporting back silently. The farmhouse had become both a defensive stronghold and a trap. Any wrong move could result in capture or death. By evening, the Germans had fully established their perimeter. They used the farmhouse's shadows to mask their approach, and officers observed every movement through binoculars. Inside, the Americans prepared for potential combat. Rifle positions were manned, ammunition checked, and defensive lines reinforced. Colonel Robert, despite the pressure, remained composed. He knew that panic would spread faster than bullets. The first engagement came unexpectedly. A German soldier attempted to cross a frozen stream near the farmhouse to outflank one of the American positions. A single shot from a carefully aimed rifle halted him, and the Germans realized that the Americans were alert and prepared. In response, they tightened the encirclement, bringing heavier weapons closer and establishing multiple firing points. As night fell, snow continued to drift, muffling sounds and making visibility difficult. The Americans huddled in corners, using blankets and coats to maintain warmth. Colonel Robert reviewed the situation again, now aware that their survival depended on both patience and precision. He sent messages through runners requesting artillery support and reinforcements, hoping the main units could respond in time. In the darkness, a decision was made. The colonel instructed small teams to approach the Germans under a flag of truce, carefully maintaining distance. The intent was to communicate their terms: safe withdrawal for the majority, surrender only if absolutely necessary. The German commandant observed from a slight elevation, assessing each move. The tension was palpable. Negotiations began slowly, through gestures, limited German, and broken English. Colonel Robert emphasized discipline, the safety of his men, and adherence to the laws of war. He offered clear terms: no ambushes, no retaliation, and minimal engagement if a withdrawal was allowed. The Germans deliberated, speaking among themselves. The night was long, but no shots were fired. By early morning, the stalemate began to shift. German officers, recognizing the discipline and coordination of the Americans, agreed to allow a partial withdrawal. Colonel Robert organized his men into small, manageable groups, each moving along predetermined routes through the forest, avoiding the heaviest concentration of German troops. Scouts led the way, marking safe passages and signaling rear teams. The operation required precision. Each step was carefully calculated to prevent accidental engagement. The Americans moved slowly, deliberately, aware that a single misstep could ignite a firefight. Outside, the Germans maintained observation, adjusting their positions but respecting the truce's implicit terms. By mid-morning, the bulk of Colonel Robert's men had successfully withdrawn. They regrouped in a nearby clearing, exhausted but alive. Only a small contingent remained in the farmhouse to finalize the retreat. The colonel himself was among them, ensuring that no man was left behind. Eventually, the Germans recognized that the building was nearly empty. They approached cautiously, securing the area without resistance. The farmhouse, once a potential trap, was now vacant. Colonel Robert and his men had turned a dire situation into a controlled tactical maneuver, relying on discipline, patience, and the calculated use of negotiation. The aftermath of the encounter was instructive for both sides. The Germans reported the Americans' restraint, noting that the decision not to fire immediately or press the advantage had prevented unnecessary casualties. The Americans, in turn, reflected on the importance of composure and tactical patience under extreme pressure. In the chaos of the Ardennes, small human decisions like holding fire, negotiating terms, and respecting the laws of war could mean the difference between life and death. For Colonel Robert, the operation reinforced a fundamental truth of leadership in combat. Resolve, planning, and humanity were as important as firepower. His ability to remain calm, communicate clearly, and prioritize the safety of his men allowed an American general and his battalion to survive one of the most dangerous situations in the Ardennes offensive. Decades later, soldiers who had been part of that encirclement would recount the experience in letters, diaries, and interviews. They spoke not of heroics, but of tension, careful observation, and the small decisions that ultimately shaped the outcome. They remembered the moment their general stood firm, yet did not act rashly, and how the enemy, too, responded in kind. In the larger scale of World War II, such standoffs rarely appear in official histories. No major battle hinged on a single farmhouse, and no medal was awarded for restraint. Yet these moments reveal the human side of war, the calculation, the courage, and the quiet understanding that sometimes survival depends on patience, negotiation, and composure rather than force alone. History rarely pauses for these subtleties, yet, for the soldiers involved, the memory was unforgettable. The frozen roads, the tense standoff, and the eventual withdrawal became a defining experience. illustrating that in war, leadership is tested not only by strategy, but by the ability to maintain discipline, protect lives, and make decisions under extreme pressure. If stories like this matter to you and you want them to reach more people, please consider liking the video. Your support helps keep these moments from being remembered only in dusty archives.